All right, everyone. I guess we'll get ourselves started here. It is 8 o'clock where I am. I don't know where everyone else is, obviously, but I hope it's not too late, not too early. But I do thank everyone for joining me tonight. So tonight I'm at the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. I'm going to be presenting on the securing your data within the Microsoft Power Platform. So the idea behind this is just like, how do you actually make sure that your data stays where you want it to do, where you want to stay, and the activities that are happening are actually allowed by your environment, your corporation. If you took in Johnny's session here just before mine, you'll find that actually some of the stuff that he talked about, I'm going to talk about as well. I may go into a little more detail, but it's some good information, especially if your organization is still looking to adopt Office 365 Power Platform or make a little more use of it. So get a couple of house cleaning things out of the way. So one thing to know here, here we go. The Microsoft the SharePoint conference is now called the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference. They'll be having, they've moved their conference to March 23rd to the 25th in Las Vegas. I actually will be speaking at that conference, assuming everything goes through just fine. And I actually will be having a session on records management. So I hope you all can make it. Big shout out to our sponsors, Proficient, CoreView, AvePoint, Affirma, KWiz, Valo, Swoop, Pointfire, Tygraph, and Cerasoft. So, without them, a lot of this couldn't happen. Really, really appreciate it. So, let me introduce myself here. My name is David Drever, and I'm actually in Crossfield, Alberta, which is just outside of Calgary. And recently, just moved here. I'll get to that in just a second. I am a senior manager and enterprise architect with Productivity Canada. So one of the things that the sponsors or the organizers suggested is write something interesting that's happened recently. Well, recently during COVID-19, I moved my entire family across provinces. So we were located in Regina, Saskatchewan, and for a few reasons we needed to move into the Alberta area, move towards Calgary, and that was a fairly interesting experience, especially during COVID-19. Everything went well, we were settled, everything went safe and sound, and I hope it is the same for everyone else. I do want to let you know I specialize in records and information management as well as the Power Platform, and I am a Office Apps and Services MVP. Now the thing, I think probably if you've been here already, you would have seen these already, but just to let everyone know, there is a raffle for an Oculus for an Oculus Quest. So there's the link there to join in on the raffle, and there'll be one in every significant section of the world. So all the Americas, APAC, and EMEA. And if you feel about donating to the charity relief funds, United Way and International Medical Corps is the charities that the conference is supporting. And if you have a feeling to submit or to provide some funds, there's some links there for you to help out. Thank you so much. So let's take a look at what we're going to talk about today. So, the first thing is, why do I need to be concerned about security? We're going to talk a little bit about environments, what they are, how do they help you, how do we control the data flow in our environment, and some other ways you can protect your environment, from a Power Platform perspective. So, why do we need to worry about security? Microsoft data centers, they're probably one of the most locked down environments in the world, right? Things that even the people that work there don't have access to the data. So, why do we need to talk about people trying to get in? we aren't really talking about that. What we're actually more concerned about in this instance here is more about the people letting the data out. So, and whether it's malicious or not, it does happen, and there's things that we can do to protect that. So let's just get an example of what I'm talking about here. So I've got a couple of demos here. Let's hope they work fine. So I'm just gonna switch over here. So what I have is I am a user in this tenant, and we don't need these right now. So I have access to Outlook. I have access to OneDrive. I have Outlook to the SharePoint environment here as well. Now, let's just say here, as a user, I receive an email from a colleague, and whether it's important or not, it doesn't really matter. But in this case, it is. So I'm going to send an email to myself here from another account on my tenant. So just so you can see what it is that I'm doing, I'll move this over here. So I'm just sending an email to the user here, our corporate budget, corporate budget is super important. And make sure you don't leak, or make sure no one else sees it. I have an attachment there. Let's see, there's a budget. And I'm going to send this off. Now, from a Exchange perspective, we have everything locked down. Things like making sure an MIP is enabled and that sort of thing. That's all there. So we see the email. I've received the email. Now, I can't forward this. Now, I'm simulating this. I don't actually have my environment configured. This is just a test environment, but I do have things configured so that it doesn't forward in my environment. So I have DLP or DLP policies in place, so I can't forward information like this. But the problem is that I just so happen to have a flow. And what happens here is that the flow is, what happens is it picks up the information and it forwards the email to that environment. And because it is doing it outside of the actual Exchange process, we go over here and into Mr. Sneaky McUser, there is that budget. Now, I didn't forward that from my mailbox. However, what I did have was a simple little flow. And all it did was when an email arrived in my mailbox, I'm forwarding it out. And by doing this, I was able to circumvent the policies in place that protected the data. So now what's happened is that this information is now available in another off-site location that I, as a domain administrator, do not have access to. I don't have access to this Gmail account. Now, what about SharePoint? So I have, let's see, why is that not going away? There we go. So I have this super secret library. Things are locked down. I don't want to provide access to anyone here. But you know what? Again, so let's just throw. I have a super secret document that I've uploaded into this environment, and here it is. Now, again, what's the concern here is that I now have I have a flow that watches for all of this to happen. And let's just wait for that flow to kick off. Let's see here. All right. So if we take a look here and go over to my Dropbox, there's that document. Again, in a Dropbox, and I very nicely put it into a corporate folder because that's where it came from. So, and all I did in this case here was, again, I just have a flow, and it's very, very simple. When a file is added to that particular library, I can create that file in a particular folder in Dropbox. Now, same thing could be said for Google if it has run here. I don't know if it's run. No, it has not yet run, but I'm sure you guys get the picture here. So the idea here is that I've actually now circumvented a lot of the security in place by using Microsoft Flow, and this is what enterprise security admins, they are concerned about, because you guys saw that, like, really, you know, 2 steps for that flow. Where'd that flow go? 2 steps for this flow, you know, that's 5 minutes of work tops. And the thing is that it's sitting there, and if you're not monitoring your environment very well, you don't know it's even there. So what can we do to protect that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's just kick things back off here. So some features that we want to think about here. So some, fears come, some fear that comes from the features that make these tools great. One of those is that you can integrate very easily with other systems. So, literally it only took me a few minutes to make that, but in the space of a 5, 10, 15 minutes, I created connections into 3 different offsite environments that I, as a data administrator or an IT admin, don't have access to because it's a personal account. Power user tools. While as a developer you can do some really amazing things with Power Apps and Flow, but when you get down to it, the tools are made for power users to utilize. This means that business security could lose control to transfer the data simply by the sheer number of people creating their own tools. If you took a look at if you're on Johnny's session there for Schlumberger, they had thousands of people developing solutions. Not everyone is going to be conscientious of the data that they are sending, to different locations and things like that. So, excuse me. So thinking about these, these 2 items alone, can you come up with some scenarios? So I've already done like sending emails from my mailbox to an uncontrolled mailbox. Sending emails to another location. But what about database data? If I could build items that watch for rows being updated or inserted into a database, couldn't I send that data into another database that my business doesn't control? So it's things like that this is what businesses worry about. So what about data flow across other regions? Some environments, they don't allow for that to happen. They don't want their data to exist in different regions, multinational. In some cases, China has some strict rules, or other countries have some other strict rules around that as well. So, regions, while they may be the least concerning, but if you're, like I said, if your company or organization has rules about data leaving the region, if your environment isn't configured properly, then you run the risk of breaking that rule. So, say for instance, you have a multi-geo tenant. It's in your the tenant is maybe housed in the United States, and your European group, they can't allow data to be transferred across those regions. So you need something to control this. There is ways to do that, and so this is where the concept of an environment comes into play. So let's talk a little bit about environments. So environments are actually a form of organization within the business and Power Platforms. And I say business and Power Platforms because while they exist within Dynamics 365, you can access them without utilizing Dynamics 365 directly. There is Dynamics in the back end, but you don't need to have Dynamics except for certain cases. So environments allow, one, to build solutions and limit users to a specific single region, Region control can assist you if you want the solutions to only exist in that particular region. You know, for example, if all of your users are in the US or there are other rules that require you can't send other data across those other regions. So it allows you to do that. And even if you can even create data, environments that exist outside of your tenant's regions. So, get back to my example there, you know, I could create an environment for Europe, and even though my tenant's in the US or Canada or something along that line. So this, you know, this allows you to organize your apps in those regions. It also allows you to organize your app security. So, you know, security around creating, administrating, you know, even approving items can be controlled by that environment. You can limit in each environment who can create solutions in which environment, and even who can approve flows. So while your company may have Power Apps and Power Automate licenses with environments, you can control who can actually create one. So there is the concept of environment admin, and this is something, again, I'm not too sure if anyone stayed on here from the previous session, but they did talk about environment admins. Now, environment admin, they have the ability to administer the entire environment. They can, you know, add, remove makers, configure the policies, you know, that sort of thing. Then you have the environment maker. They have the ability to create objects in the environment. And an object is, you know, in this context, is basically like a flow from Power Automate or a Power App. So those are the controls that you can put in place. Now, the next big ticket environment here is being able to organize your data protections. We're going to get to that in a bit, but first let's take a look at just how easy it is to actually create an environment. So we're going to go back to my tenant here. All right. Oops. So in my tenant, let's start at the admin center. So in here, if I go to all my admin centers, I have Power Apps and I have Power Automate. And if you click on here, I'm going to go into that one. So you can see here, I have a single environment, and it's just called, my default environment is located in Canada. Now, a little misleading here, if I click on new environment, I'm going to get an error message, well, not a message, just a notification. So one time, environment control was actually in either the Power Automate or the Power Apps admin platform. Now it's actually been moved to the Power Platform Admin Center. So we're going to go there. Now, for next time, you could actually just click on admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. You don't need to do that, but that button did work for us there. So I'm going to create a new tenant, a new environment. I'm going to create a trial environment just because my particular license only allows for a single production and a single trial license environment. So one thing to note with your trial environments, they only exist, there we go. They only exist for about 30 days. They get automatically deleted unless moved into a different format like Sandbox or production. So I'm going to give it a name here. So we will just call it trial tenant or trial environment 1. We'll leave it in Canada for now. We could change it to any of these different regions. We'll just leave it for Canada. And do I want to create a database? So this is a CDS database for this environment. For now, I'm not going to because I want to show you that there are some differences between the two. And so we'll click on OK. And we'll see here that it actually has already created. It's actually fairly speedy, much faster than it used to be. At times it was, I'm going to let you know, hey, you got a new environment in place. At one time, they've really sped this up. At one time, it took up to a half an hour to fully deploy, and now we can see that it is actually here and ready to go already within seconds, basically. So let's go back to our slides here. So, what else, can you do with environments? And they actually allow you to control who can create solutions. So, security within environments, it's a good way of ensuring that only those who have access can actually access the environment to do the work with the different, Power Automate and Power Apps. This does not, if I only add like myself or like maybe 10 users to the environment, that doesn't mean that I'm limiting it to being able to who can actually utilize it. It's only those who can create them and administer them. So everyone else in the environment, if they have access to the site or it's been shared with them, they can actually utilize the tools that you create for them. This security that I'm talking about here, it actually allows you to control who's actually able to create. So along with that, because you have that ability to add the creators or the makers into an environment, you actually have the ability to separate solution creators by region. So maybe you only want certain developers working in certain regions or access to certain data. So this is something to consider. Only users who should create can have access to do so. It's not open to everyone. And that's the problem right now with the defaults. Right now, the default, if you have a license to do Power Apps or to do Power Automate, you can actually work in the default tenant unless special steps are taken. So the idea behind this now is that you are able to control who is actually able to access the access the tools of Power Apps and Flow in these different environments. And the key thing here is it does not affect users from utilizing the solution. I mentioned that before, but that is a key thing to consider. So adding a user is actually very easy in a tenant here. So what I'm going to do here, so I have, if you take a look, I'm back in my environment here, this trial environment 1, and I have over here, if you look over here on the right, I have this box called access. And what this does, this is controlling who can administer the environment. So I click on this, right now we can see here that I've already, I'm automatically in there, but I want to allow others to make use of the environment, not necessarily administer it, but to actually make use of it. So if I click on see all here under Environment Maker, there's no one in here yet, so let's add somebody. So I'm going to add another, my other user here, my developer user. So drev.user, and I add them. So this means now that he is able to make use of that tenant. So if I go over now and I'm going to give this person a license, I do not believe that they have one yet, as of yet. They do. Oh, they do. I didn't give them one already. So perfect. They're good to go. So now, if I flip over to that particular person and go to Power Automate, sign in. So apparently it still wants to give me a free license, but that's fine. So choose Canada, and we'll get started. So what you're going to see now is that up over here in the environments, I have 2 now. The mistake I should have shown you before that I in fact only had 1, but now that I have been granted access as a maker, I now have access to the trial environment 1. So I'm just going to switch over to that one. So now I can see here all the content. So there's no flows in here because I've just created it. But I can get started if I wanted to. So that's really, it's really easy and it's very quick, and the turnaround is really fast. So, all right, let's go back. So, what about viewing solutions in the environment? So, an environment also allows you to keep track of solutions that exist within it. And what this happens is this allows you to, augment your other security settings. So, while security within environments is a good way of ensuring that only those who can access can, the reporting also provides you with the ability to see what they're creating. Because if you have a lot of users working on your environment or in your environment creating Power Apps and flows, you may not be able to see you may not be aware of some of the stuff they're creating, and so you can actually do that within your environment. You can also see the connections that are being used in that solution, and you can actually manage user access to those solutions as well. So just to kind of take a look here, let's go back to our environment, and I'm going to go back in as my administrator. So if we go back to go into this one here, because there's stuff that is actually created already, and we can look at the resources, and we can see that I have a Power App created. And if we take a look at this one I made for a previous conference. If we take a look at this, we can see it has a SharePoint connection. So because this is a Power App, what that means is it actually has a direct connection into a SharePoint list, and I can see who has access to it. So right now it's just the person who created it. I can change that access, so I can grant Drever dev.user. Okay, I can actually let them edit it, and we'll take away that invitation and click on save. Okay, so permissions are now updated. If I go back and as that user, we'll switch this environment. Okay, let's switch my environment. I am going to move over to apps. And we can now see that I actually have access to this application, this form. So I can actually click on it and I can edit it. And I didn't have the access to do this before. So while it's doing its thing, let's just go back and take a look at the flows for a minute. So go to Power Automate. Okay. So again, I'm back in the default environment. I don't see any flows. Oh, that's finished building. Okay, so now that I'm back here, so let's go back. That was for that Power App. Let's take a look at the flows now. So I have some flows. Those are the ones that I had here. You can actually see they're turned on, turned off. I actually have the ability to turn them on and turn them off from here. So let's take a look at this one that was actually moving it into a copy from SharePoint to Dropbox. So that's this one here. And I can see here that it has a connection to Dropbox using sneakymcuser@gmail.com. That's the account that it's made the connection under. And then it's actually accessing the SharePoint drive, the SharePoint library using the Drever account. So what I want to do here, I want to give others access. I give Drever access, click on save. Okay, so I'm now an owner on the other accounts. Let's switch over there. So remember, I couldn't see anything. So now if I refresh and go to team flows, there it is. So what I've done now is I've actually been able to, and where this comes in handy is if I'm looking at a flow here, I'm like, well, what's he doing with that? Why is he connecting to Dropbox? So because someone else created it, I could add myself as an owner, and then I can go and take a look at it and see what they're doing. And then if need to be, actions can be taken. So this is why being able to see those solutions in your environment, that's why it's so important. Now, let's talk a little bit about a CDS environment. CDS-enabled environments, when you're utilizing a common data service for any solutions, it needs to be deployed within the environment. It doesn't exist at the tenant; it actually exists in the environment within the tenant. It's actually provided through and contained within Dynamics 365, and not part of the Office 365 tenant directly. It's actually coming from a Dynamics 365 affiliate. So because of this, the security of an environment is controlled from within Dynamics and not the Office 365 tenant when you have a CDS-enabled environment. Environment admins actually become system admins within the D365 tenant, and approvers, in a flow have to be an approver, actually have to have approver access in the D365 tenant. This is fine because approval workflows require a CDS to exist within the environment for them to work. So that's a key thing to remember. You can't have, this is an aside, it's not really part of this conversation, but it is an important thing to note. If you do not have a CDS, a common data service database in your environment, you cannot create approval flows. Approval flows actually utilize that CDS environment to track the approvals and the rejections. So, like I said, the common data service is provided via Dynamics 365. The security is controlled in Dynamics. Environment admins become system admins, and the approval flow approvers need to have access. So let's just take a look at how that works. So I'm going to go here quick, and I am going to go back as my admin. And I'm going to make this a little easier, and I probably can't, but let's just see if it'll let me. I can add a database, so let's add a database. English, blah, blah. Don't want to deploy sample apps and data. And let's click on add. And so it is going to deploy a CDS into here now. Let's just see, let's give it a minute. It should, if it doesn't, we will just actually let's see here. Maybe not. Let's go back and delete this and recreate it. Oh, there it is. Very instant. So that's already built out now. Sorry. Okay. So there we go. So now we can go in here, and you notice now that I have resources for Dynamics apps, for portals, for Power Apps, and for flows. And clicking on these again, so it brings it up here. it doesn't show that there's no flows enabled here. So I haven't actually created any flows. So this is going back to that report of showing what is available. You'll notice that, you know, the access is a little different here. So if I go into my edit, I can add security groups. I can add particular security groups to the environment. What I'm going to do, this is actually where things get a little bit easier back in the flow on the Power Apps Admin Center. So if I go back here and I click on here, you can see here I have an environment. I click on security, and I want to add somebody in to be able to use. So let's add, let's just pick someone. So we will pick Alex Wilbur. So let's grab Alex's login information. Okay, click on Add User. Now before, you know, I had the option of making them a maker or an admin, but now I have this button here that says I need to assign security roles. And what this is going to do, and it's probably a little slow, so we'll see how quickly it goes through here, but we'll log in here. And what this is actually going to do now is it's actually going to open up a user control module within Dynamics 365. So I've actually left Power Platform, I've left like the Power Platform Admin Center. I'm actually out of Office 365 and into Dynamics 365 now, all because of that CDS environment. So this takes a few minutes to load. So I am just going to go back. We'll come back to that. So I've kind of shown you how you can actually set things up to control who has access to the environment, who can be a maker, who's an admin, how you can, you know, keep users from being able to you know, create things when they shouldn't be. But, you know, what about the data itself? You know, what about your financial information? What about, you know, your personal information? What about company-specific documents? How do we stop that from getting out? And this is a key thing. And so what we want to do here is we want to look at controlling your data flow. So what you actually have available, let's go back and check to see if that has finished. It has. Okay, so going back to the, I'm just going back to the CDS enabled here. So if we take a look, this is now the environment administration for users. And if we take a look at the drevedev.user, we manage the roles, you can see that this person is listed as an environment maker. Okay, and that's all they have access to do. They don't have access to do anything else within here. If we take a look at drevedev, who is the main one, they are a common data service user, and they are also the system administrator. But now we have Alex. Alex here, he is not creating Power Apps or flows. He's actually just an approver. So I can actually go in here, manage roles. I can, where is that here? Oh, where did it go? They move it down me here. Help page, common user, delegate, environment maker. Something has changed. It might be delegate now. Anyways, I can give them access. By doing this, I'm actually not stopping them from being able to do, or not creating a path for them to do more than they're allowed to do. I'm actually limiting them to just being able to approve their workflows. Excuse me. All right. So going back here to controlling your data flow. So this is what we're trying to do here is making sure that your data stays where it needs to stay. So what you have now is you have DLP policies. DLP policies, data loss prevention policies, they control the data flow through the connectors, not the actual data where it's located or where it's going to end up. It's actually controlling the flow of how it moves. You can apply the policies to all of the environments, to some of them, or just to one environment at a time. So how do we set this stuff up to protect our data? So as an admin of Power Apps and Flow, I don't want to stop others from creating apps for themselves or for their team, but there's a purpose. That's why Flow and Power Apps is there. But I also want to ensure our data is secure within our domain of control. I don't want my data going to Google or Box or OneDrive, or sorry, not OneDrive, Google Drive, something that I don't have access to. So as soon as the data leaves our controlled systems, we can't stop it from being used. So this is where DLP comes into play. There are other protections. I know there's AIP or MIP as it's called now that can protect that data when it's outside your domain, but I'm trying to stop it before that even happens. So the idea behind this is being able to control the connectors that you use in your tenant. So if I go back to my environment and look at my data policies, I don't have any data policies right now, and I want to create a new policy, and I can apply it to all of my environments. I can apply it to just the trial tenant or the trial environment or the primary default, or I can apply it to all environments except. So if I have a bunch of environments, I can do that. So in this case, I actually just want to apply it to my default tenant, or my default environment. So I click continue. Now, what you see here is basically a bucket of what is allowed from a connection perspective. So everything that's together, we have two buckets. We have a business data only, and we have a no business data allowed. So what this is here is anything that's in the same bucket together can communicate. So right now, I have SharePoint. Well, SharePoint, because it's in the same one as, where are we here? Not really easily defined. Let's see here. If I'm looking for Dropbox, there it is, sorry, right in front of my face. So I have SharePoint and Dropbox together. That means that they can communicate back to each other. So in order to control this, I need to add where my business data lives. I need to add that into a separate container from the ones where my data should never exist. So I have SharePoint, I have OneDrive for Business, Dynamics, Salesforce, SQL Server. Let's see, no, I've probably got more, but this is good for now. So now that I've added these connectors up into data only, any connectors that utilize anything from business data only to no business data allowed are going to fail. So what I'm going to do here, let's go back and take a look. So if I go to my Power Automate. So we're going to see here that I have copy to Google Drive, so I have my copy of files. We're going to see now that it's not working, it's turned off. So let's go turn it back on. So it is, let's just make sure to actually save this. Oh, I didn't save it. Silly. Okay, hold on a second. Let's go back here. Copy files. Let's turn this on. Okay, we're turned on. So let's save the policy. Okay, so I've got this policy in place. Now, if I go here and try to do a test, and sometimes it'll kick it off before I even get to this point. It didn't, so let's just do an edit. Let's run a test. Oh, there it is. It just kicked in. So your flow is disabled, and you'll need to enable it for testing. Well, why is it disabled? So if I go and try to turn it on, it should give me a message. It's not. Why is it not giving me a message? There, it's suspended here. So we can see that it's suspended. And it should have given me a message. And I'm not too sure, I do apologize, I'm not sure why it's not. If I maybe go to the Power Platform Center, and look at my flows of that environment. So we want to go into here. You can see it's disabled. I do apologize, everyone. It should be telling me why it's not, and it doesn't seem to be doing that. And I'm not too sure why. Usually you see a message up the top here saying that it's disabled because it doesn't meet. So let's just try creating, did I make the right, this is in Drever, yeah. So let's just see here. Got a couple minutes left. Let's just see if we can figure out why it's not. So I got this, my probably only environment, so just that one here. And I have SharePoint in this one, and this one is not. So let's just create a new one to see if it gives me the error message. So let's create an automated files added to a folder, test flow, create. Okay. Conference, super secret library. Next step, let's add Dropbox. Create a file. Okay, give it the name. We'll give it the content, and we'll click on save. Okay, so I do apologize. Something is not, I must have missed something. And I'm running out of time. What should have happened here is that it actually should not have enabled. It should have created in a disabled activity suspended, and the reason it should have done that is because the policy is in place. So maybe the policy has not been applied yet across the tenant. So we'll come back, we'll see if it suspends in a minute here. So getting back, we can finish off our slides here. So things to think about when you're trying to control your data is, if you're unsure of the connector, don't put your connectors into the same group as a business data connector. You can also block it, block connectors as well. If you need other connectors, separate them into a controlled environment, so it's a trial or a sandbox that you can utilize there. So what about other ways to protect your data? So you have the option of actually using flow itself to protect your data. You can create a flow from a template. So I go back to create a new flow. There is actually a template here that is called, so we create from template. And I don't have time to actually implement it here, but it's called get list of new Power Apps. So get list of new Power Apps flows and connectors. When I click on continue, and there we go. Sorry, it was just there we go. So basically what this flow does is it goes through all of your environments and it finds what has been created recently and what connectors are used, what flows, what Power Apps. It goes through, it presents a report to you, and you can actually say, run this every once a day, and what's been created today. And what that does, it's a bit of a reactive as opposed to proactive, but it does let you see what was created and what connectors were utilized and that sort of thing. So there is tools out there So remember this one here, get list of new Power Apps, flows, and connectors. It's already there, it's already created, it works, you don't have to build anything, and it builds a report and it can be sent to you. So we take a look here when we get to the end, and it actually sends it to you as an email. Okay. So you have the flow, and again, you have the new data connector report. So what about sensitivity labels? So we talked about this a little bit earlier. You can, through MIP, you can encrypt your documents in SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams and groups. And that way, even if it does get out of your environment, it isn't available anymore. No one can open it up. You can encrypt emails in Exchange as well, so that your data is protected, even if it does get out. So these are just different things you can do, not really parts of this presentation, but I did want you to be aware of them. You can actually encrypt and protect your data at the location so that if it does get out, whether you have a policy or not created, it is protected even at the other end. We talked about the data loss prevention, block access based on rules, encrypt data based on rules. Okay, guys, I am at time. Thanks for joining. Please, speaker feedback would be greatly appreciated. I'd like to know what you liked, what you didn't like, the event feedback as well. Fantastic, guys. Really, really thank you for being part of this event, and to our sponsors. So here again, here's your slides. Sorry, your scans to do a speaker feedback, and then the event feedback. I'll give you just a second to take a look at that. And then finally here, big thank you, from me and from me to the organizers, sponsors. If it wasn't for you guys, we would not be able to make this possible at all.